Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book, Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. 2, because I'm a fan of punk music. And 3, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough from me right now. Let's get into the interview. A big thank you goes out to the folks at Sugar CRM for sponsoring my podcast this month. Now, Sugar CRM is the provider of the #1 rated customer experience platform, which is trusted by thousands of companies all over the world and helps them achieve high definition CX. Recently, they released their new CRM and sales impact report, which surveyed 1,000 sales professionals from around the globe on what's driving or stalling revenue and customer engagement. The report also asks a provocative question. Are companies on the cusp of a customer relationship crisis? To find out the answer, find the report in the resources section of sugarcrm.com. Now, let's get back to the interview. So, welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Borzou Azabdaftari, who is the boss at the Falcon Lab, a full-service marketing agency, amongst many other things. But Borzou, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Adrian. That was excellent work on the last name.
I tried. I'm trying my best.
Not many people even attempt it.
So, for the benefit of our listeners that are not familiar with you and also the work that you do, can you tell us a little about yourself and about the work that you do?
We have 2 companies. We have the Falcon Lab, which is more print and promo focused in the marketing space, and then Nickel Bronx, which is more focused on branding, market research, and email automation. So Nickel Bronx kind of like sets everything up, right. And then the Falcon Lab helps implement some of it.
So Nickel Bronx kind of like sets it up, and Falcon Lab smashes it out of the park.
Yeah, I like
that.
There you go.
So we were introduced to each other by David Rendell and Stan Phelps. Stan's a good friend of mine, and I was intrigued by your story, the story that they told me, and that's kind of what led me to get introduced to you and for us to have a chat, and then for me to invite you on the podcast. But before we get into that, the real subject of it, I wanted to step back, and because I've been asking people on the podcast, particularly on the basis of what we've gone through and what we're still sort of going through, ask people to reflect on the last 12 months and what's changed for them and what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the marketplace, particularly with clients, and some of the biggest lessons you've learned, because, got to admit, it's been a weird last year, right?
It's been a very weird year. Some of the more obvious stuff, obviously, is the switch to remote, right? Which is something we had talked about and we thought we weren't ready for. And funny thing about not having a choice is you make it work. We need to make it work. And business-wise, the digital side of the house has been busy as people are getting online and more people are trying to sell online where they had more direct channels to customers before. So that's been at least growing for us. Right. On the physical marketing side, so much of what we did was based around events. Right. And we did, especially for B2B, which we do a lot of B2B, it's all set up around conferences and face-to-face sales and meetings and things like that. So getting a hold of that and trying to replicate that business has been a challenge.
Right.
I'm optimistic, as I think everyone is, that we're pretty close to back to normal, but not that close. And I feel like big in-person conferences are literally going to be the last thing to come back.
Yeah, I hear that. I would echo that. I think that we've I think there's a lot of people that have just gone, maybe 2021, we're just going to write that off. There's some people that are still trying to be ambitious and go, we'll do something late in the year. But I think most people are just going, we're going to write that off and give ourselves a break for 21, and then try and hopefully, fingers crossed, we can come back in 22.
Well, and I think the uncertainty is the biggest challenge, right? Like when we got locked down originally, so my birthday's in July.
Right.
And we locked down in March, and I was like, I really hope this lasts until July, so my birthday can be the first thing everyone does. Now we're like coming around another year, and I'm like, maybe this year I can have a party.
Yeah.
But it's one thing, like a normal recession, you a little bit see it coming. You kind of know how these things work. You have an idea of how long it's going to last. This has just been, literally one day was close all the doors.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember at first, they were like, 2 weeks, we all lock down, it'll be fine. And so we just didn't plan for this. Yeah. I don't think anyone did.
No, I don't think there's anything that we could have, I don't think as individuals and individual business owners, I don't think there's much you could have done to really can prepare for it. I know that some bigger firms have fared well because they, through happenstance, had done some, disaster planning and all that sort of stuff, and training and capability building and things and so on and so forth. But most people were just forced to adapt very, very quickly. And I personally, I was, I'm quite lucky in that, and I feel very grateful, very fortunate in that regard, that I've been reasonably busy for the last year with client work, despite all of the things. Now, initially there was a bit of a rocky kind of period and a period of uncertainty right at the beginning, and a lot of stuff disappeared, but then some stuff continued, and then a bunch of other stuff came back. And I am hugely grateful for that, because I know that a lot of other people in the sort of either small business or independent space haven't fared very well, or found it a much, much rockier road.
Well, it's a total crapshoot. If you had asked me before COVID, what were like the safest businesses to be in, I would have thought from like a technology perspective, I would have thought restaurants, in-person stuff, masseuses, gyms, right? Like even Airbnb, everything that got destroyed was on my list of what would have been the safest things.
Sure. Just tells you, you can't make, it's really hard. It's, problematic to make really big assumptions now that we've gone through all of this. So anyway, as I was saying previously, we were introduced to each other via David Rendell and Stan Phelps. So big shout out to them and thank you to them. Because I was saying I was intrigued by your story, particularly around the evolution of your values and how you now describe yourself. One of the things you used to describe yourself, you say, we make cool shit. And I was like, I love that. That's cool. But there's an evolution to that, right? It's like, so can you tell me about that evolution and what your values are now?
Well, and so I was taught about values, right? So it was a very traditional print shop business at first,
right?
And it's very difficult thing to differentiate yourself with. And I was always looking for kind of education, and I ended up joining this accelerator program in EO, and I really wanted to kind of do it the right way for someone who didn't go to business school, doesn't have an MBA, really just trying to figure it out. And the first time we learned about values, and I was a little bit younger too, so maybe not as comfortable in my skin.
Right.
I did it. I don't even remember what the values were, but I picked what sounded like the right answer.
Right.
And I may have
the exam question.
Yeah. Well, so we were in this accelerator program, and the instructor gave us his core values, and I think I even took some of his.
Right.
But I was like fastidiousness.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a very unnecessary word anyway.
And what the hell does it mean?
Right? Attention to detail.
Right.
And then it was like, I don't know, work hard, truth, honesty, right? And what they were like semi, I guess, good things for someone to have, but they certainly were not unique to my company.
Right.
And they also certainly really didn't embody my values. And as I learned and grew and discovered more about this, was that if it's just something anyone should always do, like honesty, right? Like honesty is not a core value, right? Like people should just be honest.
Sure.
like that's it's not a differentiating core value. Let me put it that way.
It's table stakes.
Yeah, exactly. Like you shouldn't even be with us
in the room,
up in the air for you, right? And we actually started using make cool shit almost as like, I don't want to say a gag, right? But we had no intention of leading our marketing with it.
Right.
And I forget exactly what we rolled it out for. I think it was like, it was some drinking related event, like a brewery or tailgate or something. And we rolled it out and people just loved it.
Right.
And little by little, it went from like this one event to like, maybe we'll put it on the business cards, to maybe we'll put it on the website, to becoming almost our tagline.
Right.
And it was around that time that I got kind of another schooling on core values. And this time it was around customers.
Right.
And they were telling me that, like, listen, your core values aren't not just for you. And they said, think back on all the real problem customers you had. If you had pushed them and like graded them by your core values, would they have aligned? And especially at that point, like early on, the idea of throwing away business is just like crazy.
Yeah.
Right. Like I would literally do anything for anyone if they paid me at that time. But once someone put that frame around it, right? Like, oh, I lost money on that job. Me and that customer had a bad relationship, right? It's because these people don't align with what my real values are.
Yeah.
And so we redid them all. And we redid them and we made them something that were true core values for us, like really made sense for what we were going to do. And we did it together. I did it with a bunch of my employees, which I think is the right way to do it. Like you're still the boss, you can still guide it, right? And you can throw something out if it doesn't make sense to you. And the advice that I always got was, if you're not willing to fire an employee or customer for not adhering to this core value, it's not a core value.
Right.
Right. Like somebody said they were going to make prayer their core value. And the instructor was like, are you really going to fire someone because they're not praying? Like if everything else is. And so we landed on make cool shit, give a fuck, grow, hustle, and be cool. Give a fuck in particular is one that seems to rile some people, but
well, I totally want to answer. I totally want to ask you about that, but I wanted to before we get to that, because I think that that's one of the most, I guess, contentious kind of ones. But the thing I wanted to ask you about is that they either make cool shit. That's fine. Get that. Grow. Yeah, I can get that. Hustle. I can sort of get that because that speaks to like a behavior sort of thing. But also the kind of the be cool. I think the thing I like about some of those kind of ones is they're not fixed, right? They're like they're evolutionary in many ways.
And they apply to a lot of different scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. And so I like that. They're sort of they're flexible in the themselves almost by definition. But if we go back to the give a fuck, because that is the kind of the most contentious one. I mean, like, why give a fuck? Why not just care? Or I don't know if you're going to get this reference. In the words of Faith No More, we care a lot.
So these values are designed to attract, but also to repel. Right. So in the interest of weeding out customers, because I'm not going to get through many meetings without dropping an F-bomb anyway. And so saying that is so like offensive to you that you're not going to be able to take it, you're probably not going to like working with us.
Yeah.
And the core values, they are on the site and they are in our literature, but they're not as front and center.
Right.
But same thing, right? If that really bothers you, then I don't need to go a ton deeper to realize that it's probably not going to work out.
Right.
And I don't think it's the same thing.
Right.
Right. Like I care about a lot more things than I give a fuck about. Right. And I feel like, like giving a fuck is a higher level of involvement.
It's like a higher standard, right? You're holding yourself to a higher standard.
Yeah. And to the multi-application thing, like, it's like I want people to give a fuck about, yes, our company, yes, our customers, right? But also each other, the other employees, also just like the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Like I don't want to be around someone who's a nihilist and just doesn't give a shit what happens all the time. Whether it's work related or not.
Yeah. Well, it's almost a bit like you can care about something, but there's possibly an implication that what's implied in that you can care about something, but like you said, it's almost like you can care but still be struck with inertia, as it were. You can care about it, but you're going to do sweet FA about it. But if you give a fuck about something, then you're going to try and do something about it in whatever way, shape, or form, right?
Yeah, I really like that inertia comment. I'm going to weave that in to my story on the values. That's
Steal
really
away,
good.
my friend. Steal away.
Thank you. I'll credit my source.
So, I mean, when you kind of launched all this, I mean, because I really like it. I really like it. You talked about kind of it being differentiated in the market. I mean, and you talked about it's there to attract and repel. I mean, has it really attracted and repelled people? I mean, has it repelled existing clients that you had? People have just gone, what? We're off.
So part of the issue with this whole thing is like, you don't always know, right? Like, I don't know who saw this and never reached out or chose not to do business with us. I do know for sure that it's attracted people.
Right.
We had, and you can just see their eyes light up when they see it, right? And they remember it.
And they start rubbing their hands and going, this is going to be fun.
Yeah. And I mean, I've had clients walk in for literally the first meeting, with like just a huge smile on their face and throw their bag down and be like, let's make some cool shit. It just like gets them. I'm like, I haven't even told you yet. Like, let's go. But I'm like, yeah, let's go. And then
they can see potential in it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and it just if it's appealing to them, they want to do that. They want to be a part of that, right? Which is how it's supposed to work. On the negative side, I only know of 2 instances where it even came up, although I do feel like I would not usually hear about it.
Right.
One was and it was a pretty big company. It was like a Fortune 100 company. And we were pitching something to them. And like most things, we're pitching at a certain level, but it has to go up a level to get approved still.
Sure.
And so apparently they were in a meeting and the CMO saw it and was like, what? Make cool shit? They were like, what kind of company is this? And like, obviously we had an advocate in the room and they go, listen, we need something edgy. Like, we need someone like this.
Yeah.
And the CMO just goes, okay. And like signs off on it.
Right.
So
there was no heavily redacted proposal that went upstairs. They just was like, no, we're just going to kick it upstairs and see what happens.
Yeah. And then, but I have another client who just hates it. They're super religious. They are not into it. They did not leave, but they were like, don't show our work in our portfolio. Don't post our stuff in your emails or on the website. And that's actually another scenario where the people we're working with were attracted to it and really liked it. But the higher ups didn't want to be affiliated with that, which was kind of a little bit of both, right? Like, obviously we could have lost that account over, and I'm sure we've lost some business, but we also the people who ended up being able to make the decision were able to keep us because they were drawn to that.
Right.
I kind of, not to make it political, but I kind of look at it as like politics, right? As soon as one side boycotts something, the other side starts spending money there. So it ends up being kind of like a net like wash.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
mean, I think it's fascinating because people can then kind of like they don't necessarily have to align with it. They can actually understand the sensibility behind it. They can like the outcomes, but they don't necessarily kind of want to be directly associated with it.
yeah. And again, I've no doubt there have been negative consequences I'm not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think the good has been better than the bad.
So, I mean, in all this, I mean, because this is the thing I kind of find because I'm, I guess in my, um, I feel like I'm becoming because I talk about punk CX and all that sort of and taking more punk approach to customer experience and I've used a bit of kind of profanity in the kind of the last book just to try and shake things up a little bit, but it also kind of aligns with my increasingly cantankerous and kind of impatient kind of like view of the world. But I'm fascinated by this idea about profanity and how in some circles it's still a really taboo thing, particularly because I know of research that has found that there's this direct connection between profanity and being actually more honest and straightforward. I mean, do you think it still is a taboo and, or are we seeing this bifurcation of or trifurcation or whatever of society? And it's like, you're either in this camp or you're not.
I think there's a little bit of that. I think the tide is turning. I think we're seeing a lot more people be really comfortable with profanity.
Right.
And I think they can use it, as a way to stand out.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people, I'm a big fan of the H.G. Wells quote, moral indignation is jealousy with a halo, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a very hard time seeing the position of people. Like, I totally get if you don't like profanity and don't want to use it, but I don't understand the people that find it highly offensive.
Right.
Like really, really offensive. But I know they're out there, and I've met them and I've seen them, and I cuss when I interview people intentionally to weed them out.
Sure.
I had someone referred to me once by a friend, and I just did like shit in the interview, which I don't even consider a bad word.
Yeah.
And she got a little shiver. And I was like, are you not okay with cursing? She's like, I just don't see a reason for it. I was like, do they not curse where you work now? And she goes, well, we had one sales guy who did, and I started a swear jar, and then he stopped. And I was like, okay. I was like, this interview is over.
You are not going to get through your first day here.
Yeah, but I had a music teacher who was a big Lenny Bruce fan,
mm-hmm.
and who really, he used to tell me all the time that Lenny Bruce died for our sins.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, that beatnik culture, he's like, it was so subtle that you guys didn't realize. But everything from cursing to like just the more casual nature of the way we dress, right? Like people used to go out in suits and top hats all the time.
Yeah.
He goes, you guys owe it all to them for making this happen.
Wow, that's. I think the thing is, we always have to tip our hats to some of the forefathers and foremothers that blaze a trail in this. And whether it's
he was getting arrested on stage for saying shit.
Yeah.
He'd get charged with profanity on a regular basis. Could you imagine?
Yeah. You drop the F-bomb as the punchline to a joke, and the police gonna start trotting in.
Yeah, but like that would happen on the regular in New York. In New York, of all places. In New York City. This isn't like some bumfuck town that he's doing one night in.
Perfect. I mean, so can you kind of do you think they are? I mean, are they fixed? These values, or are they always under kind of review? Or are you going to add to them, or is that it right? Is that it now? This is the set that you found that work for you.
It definitely feels like it for right now. I'm certainly open to changing it if it doesn't serve us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would be because of profanity. If I did, I think it would be because I don't know. Either. So the way that one of the exercises I've seen for figuring these out is you just take your best employees and you write down all their attributes, and you're like, I want more people like this, right? So if I saw like a skill or value or something that like I felt really needed to be represented in our culture, maybe I would, but I don't have any immediate plans to do it, and I would wager it's more likely they'll stay like this forever.
Perfect. So, Borzou, if I may, I think all of this sort of stuff feeds into the area that I explore, i.e., kind of what does it take to deliver great service or a great experience to our our customers and also to our people. And so I always like to ask people for their perspective on what do they think sort of the future of experience kind of looks like, and what do you think the sort of the key challenges are that lie ahead that we've got to overcome? I mean, so it'd be great if you could give me your take on that.
So I think it's becoming just more and more about like authenticity and accessibility. I'm generally, and I think this is where I align a little bit with your Punk CX approach. I don't like the systemization and like data-driven everything of the world, right? Like I like a little personality and authenticity and just realness coming through.
Right.
And so I hope that that's the difference, right? And I hope that we treat customers like people and give them an experience that feels like authentic and like they're just fucking talking to someone.
Yeah.
Like there's like I don't like the super strict tied up B2B and even B2C a lot of times, right? Like here are the numbers, here are the facts, here's the whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to get to know the person, I want to get to know the story. And I, even as a customer, I feel like my satisfaction with that experience is less based on the outcome all the time and more based on how my relationship with the person feels and goes.
Sure. Absolutely. I think it's fascinating because you mentioned the B2B and sort of space, and you also going to mention the word story. And I've seen some research that says that, the majority of B2B marketeers and salespeople know that storytelling is a key skill and can be very effective in terms of engaging kind of people and clients and holding on to them, as it were. But yet they find it so difficult to do because I feel like the dominant logic of the many parts of the B2B space is about that, data and features and benefits and et cetera, different stages and so on and so forth. And they forget the relationship side of things.
Well, and I think they're just afraid to stick their neck out, right? Like nobody wants to be the one who gets their head chopped off because they tried something that was a little bit different.
Yeah.
And especially the bigger the company is, the less they feel like they need to do that.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
Which is why I think SMBs have more creative marketing most of the time, right? Unless like you're fucking Nike, right? Nike just doesn't give a fuck and swings for the fence every time.
I think, to be fair, kind of Apple, I think, does that as well with a lot of their adverts, which I don't know who their agency is and if it swaps around and stuff, but they see their kind of their adverts and you're like going, you just killed it again.
So Apple's definitely amazing and definitely goes really hard with kind of the storytelling and how the product makes you feel over features and benefits, right? Which I think is amazing. But I mean, Nike gets political, which is dangerous today.
Oh no! I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I wrote a piece. I wrote a piece about sort of like the stance that brands take about being kind of political and the pros and cons of it and how it's worked for some and not worked for others and things. But I'm more of the mind that there's a track in the book which is a complete kind of like it borrowed from there's a track from a band called Skunk Anansie on their Stoosh album called "Yes, It's Fucking Political." And I use that as a track because it is, right? It's like you increasingly seeing people that are looking to companies to go, do the right thing, stand up for things that matter to us and that matter to your people. and matter to your communities. And so, yeah, I think the shout out to Nike is spot on, and they've been doing it for years as well.
Yeah,
So
and I think
fair play to them.
Yeah, no, they're killing it. I don't remember the last time I saw a Nike ad and was like,
Yeah, they don't really get that meh kind of treatment very often.
Yeah.
Which makes me think, kind of, how many things do they have to churn through before they get to that's the one? Because
that's interesting. I'd love to be behind the scenes and see how they come up with these ideas.
Because you probably get a whole bunch of brands that be scrabbling like, we'll take that, we'll take that, we'll take that. And Nike's going like, that just does not work for us. That shit just doesn't hit the bar.
Yeah.
So if I was to ask you, kind of, Borzou, if I was to ask you to kind of boil this down to something, because, a lot of people are looking to try and, do their best and try and improve, try and deliver a, better service, a better experience to their customers. But sometimes I also kind of feel that there's so much stuff going on that they sort of don't know where to start, right? There's that sort of inertia thing again. They kind of like going, I don't know where to take what the first step should be. If I was to ask you to say, what would be your best advice for somebody who's looking to improve the service experience they deliver to their customers, what would you say to them? What sort of say, do this or do that? What would it be?
I mean, I would say the golden rule is a good place to start. Treat them the way you'd want to be treated. I think so many businesses end up, because, as well as anyone, running a business is a grind, right? It's a challenge and you're kind of on your own. And I think too many people end up taking their customers for granted.
Yeah.
And seeing CX as a nuisance, like a thing they have to deal with, where I think if people spent more time, and I do this all the time, as a customer, when I'm having an experience, if I get pissed, I'm like, why am I pissed? Like, I got to figure this out. So I make sure we never do this. Right. Yeah. Or if I have a great experience, I'm like, why am I so happy? Like, what did this person do that made me feel this way? And I think because like industries are different, I think a real basic thing is like, how would you want to be treated? Right. Because sometimes the customer does have a fucking stupid question. Right. But if you had a stupid question and just didn't understand something, like, what would you want the person you're paying money to do?
Yeah.
Right. You would want them to take a second, break it down for you, maybe jump on right. Like whatever it takes to help you.
Yeah.
And so for one place to start, that would be it. Just imagine how you would want to be treated in that situation. And because it's easy, again, for someone to be like, oh, I would never be in that situation because I understand how this works.
Yeah.
But like, what if it was something that you didn't understand how it worked?
Oh, exactly. Because people when they're in whatever business, there's a curse of expert knowledge. People don't appreciate kind of how much they know and how simple it seems to them. But it doesn't.
And they're like, how does my customer not understand this?
Yeah, exactly. And you look at it and just go, hang on, you've been at this for 10 years. You've just met them the other day. Of course, they're not going to have the same level of knowledge.
And frankly, if they understood it, they probably wouldn't be paying you to do it.
There's the truth. Brilliant.
I say all the time, most of what we do, it's not rocket science.
No.
Like it's like I could give you my playbook on how to do it, and it would just take you so long that you would probably give it back to me and be like, all right, thanks. Right. It's just the amount of time it takes to implement it and do it consistently.
Absolutely. Perfect. I love that. So thank you for that. So, Borzou, one final thing that I always try and finish these interviews on, as I explained before we started, that I published a new book, or relatively new book, called Punk CX back in 2019. And since then, I've been asking people on the back of these interviews a couple of questions. It's like my ongoing piece of social market research, as it were. I don't know if it's a panel. I don't know if it's longitudinal. I don't really care. I'm just creating this big list. And so the first question is, I want to ask is like, what one word, or maybe two words if you like, would you use to describe a more punk approach to customer experience, say?
I'm leaning towards either authenticity or counterculture, right? Because I do, in the way I interpret it, think it's about just like being yourself and real and a person, which is so different than what everyone else is doing.
Right.
Right. And if you look at like how upset everyone is when like customer service gets outsourced to a different country, it's not because, well, maybe sometimes it's because they want the job to stay here, but it's just because they're not getting a good experience. They're not like connecting with the person, you know? And so I think those two things. I think authenticity, right? Because like my core values don't work for everyone either.
Sure.
You know, like not another company could do that. But I think those would be my two if I can do that. Authenticity and counterculture, because it's.
Well, I'll tell you that authenticity I think is already on the list, but counterculture isn't. So I'll definitely put that one on the list.
I'm not going to lie. That's the other reason I did two, is because I wanted to try to get one you didn't have.
You're going to double up. I want to get on the list. And so the second question is, so what sort of company or brand do you think epitomizes that sort of more punk approach?
So I still think Nike's a big one in terms of the way that they do advertising. Although I don't know what their CX experience is like. I think WeWork actually has kind of a punk CX type experience.
Do they still exist?
They do still exist. SoftBank has purchased the whole thing, and they're actually rocking and rolling, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, they were basically too big to fail. They missed their IPO situation. I haven't seen the documentary yet, but it's on my list.
Right.
But they're actually a customer of mine, which is why I'm like on top of it.
Okay.
But they basically, when they couldn't IPO and everything kind of started falling apart and all the investors wanted out, SoftBank was their biggest investor at the time. And really just to protect their investment, they just bought everyone out.
Right.
So they own the whole thing. I'm under the impression that they were basically able to close a bunch of locations that were not making money. So the problem was less that it wasn't like profitable and more that they were just growing so fast and they had a bunch of locations that weren't doing anything.
Right. Okay.
But if you ever go to a WeWork, have you ever worked at one?
Yeah, no, I've been to a number of them. I think they're cool. They're cool spaces.
Well, but it's not just that. The people are so nice. I would even, here, you want to laugh? I would even do Chick-fil-A as one.
Chick-fil-A.
The people at, and you know, from a core values perspective, Chick-fil-A could not be more different than mine. Right? Yeah. But either WeWork, any employee will just give you their cell phone if you want to hit them up for something, you know? And that's so rare, I think, anywhere. And they always just just treat me like I'm the most important person there if I need something.
Nice.
And then Chick-fil-A too. I was there with my kids one time and my daughter was acting up and they just brought him ice cream. They are so in front of troubleshooting problems. Right. And quick to do stuff. It's unbelievable. It blows my mind just from a general fast food service perspective that I cannot imagine they're making that much more than the people at other fast food chains. But I assume it's the way they're trained and taught to interact with customers that it's really something else. Nice. If you Google their viral videos about how fast they get people to drive-thrus, how helpful they are. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I think they're great. They're two great examples. And so, yeah, thank you for that. And so, Borzou, that's all I have today. I mean, I just want to say, I think that just congratulations on, the evolution of the values. I think you've got the coolest set of values that I think I've ever seen. So
thank you, man. That means a lot.
Big hat tip to you on that one. And thank you so much for, being a guest on the podcast, and sharing your time and your insight and your expertise with us today. That's been nice.
I appreciate it, man. Anytime.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did. And I always do, actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. One final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.